Happy post earnings 2023 Q4. I'm Shady Josh, and this is going to be a bit of a different video than I've done before. The videos I've done up to this point have been pretty well crafted and scripted and edited. This one is a bit different, so I will go all over the place in this video, and I would say I'd urge you to sort of stay with me, because I think from reading X and the comments that I see around the retail community, there is a lot of stuff that it just isn't well known in the community, and I would really love to just share some knowledge that I have. Now, I don't want to be patronising, and so that's not my intention for this video, and to portray that I know more than other people, but I do in some cases, just from reading the comments, and there is some stuff that if you know and you really understand, you will be a much more well-equipped investor in Lemonade. So let's get into it. I've seen a lot of chat around X recently that Lemonade has got some issues, that there's some problems. I've even seen bulls that I really respect saying, "Oh, is there a question mark now over whether the pricing of the AI is working?" There's all these questions out there, so I wanted to tackle some of those. The questions really as to whether the pricing is working are around home and motor, so I will tackle those first. Let's start with home. So we know that in the last sort of year, 2-3 years, there's been this huge inflation scenario going on, and I'll sub in a few photos as we go just to show what I'm talking about. So people in the community say they understand what that means, but I don't think they do, and I really want to break it down and make it very clear as to why that has affected Lemonade the way that it has, and why we can trust management when they say that things are under control, and so on. So let's draw a timeline. I want you guys to think about when Lemonade sells a policy, but in fact let's talk about a group of policies. Let's go right back to 2018 Q2, and let's say in that quarter Lemonade sold $10 million of home premium, of home insurance policies. Okay, so what would that have been based on? That would have been based on, if we just whiz over here, let's just talk about pricing. Before we get to that, let's talk about pricing. So in pricing, in fact I won't draw this bit, but in pricing we have a load of customers and we sell them policies, right? And we collect information about those customers, like their age and where they live and their address and how many kids they have, or whatever data Lemonade is allowed to collect, they will collect. And then that is in the premium data. And then over time, we get claims come in, and then we attach the claims back to those policies, and we look at the characteristics of the claims and look at the policies and say, like, what did all the policies that had high loss frequency and severity have in common? And then from there we say, oh, this is a key piece of information that they had 2 kids or whatever it is, or probably not kids, but like they had water near their home, or they had an old roof or something. So over time we refine our pricing based on the claims information, and then we link it back to the policy data. And so for that you need some claims, and so we'll get to that in a second. But let's just say that in 2018, when Lemonade sold their $10 million worth of premium, this is important, so I will say this many times, and I'll show you a picture in a minute as to why this is accurate. But let's just say that at that time, from let's say 2010 to 2018, you had inflation rates looking like this. Let's call this 3% per year, and I think that's a pretty good number to use. But then let's say that in, I might just hold it there, I'll just grab a different colour pen. Let's say that in let's say this is 2019, okay? So from 2010 to 2019, inflation was one thing. Now, what happened? You guys who are in the market and reading the news and stuff know that in 2020 the pandemic came along, but more specifically that affected the supply chain. So suddenly you were unable to really go out and buy things like timber and concrete and copper and materials, right? And at the same time as there was this big shortage due to lockdowns and factories shutting down and so on and so forth, at the same time everybody was at home, they weren't going to work, and so what did those people want to do? Well, they thought, well, I've got nothing to do, let me do a project at my house, let me clean out that old room. As for me, I built a massive shed in my garden, and So I went out to the store and I remember specifically buying plywood, sheets of plywood for £20. So remember that number. Now, all these people going out and buying all these materials to do stuff did one thing, put demand up and supply was down. So what happened to prices? Prices of home materials did this, and we know the numbers and they're pretty well understood, but let's just call that 12%. Now you remember I said earlier that we're pricing policies that we're selling in Q2 2018. So how do we do that? We look at the loss history and we would then, let's say you had a loss that was in 2014, let's say a portfolio of losses were like, they summed up to 8 million, and you say, well, all being equal, if I want to use that 2014 loss data to price for 2018 policies, let me apply some inflation, right? So we apply that 3% per year inflation, and then we get to our expected loss cost, let's call that, right? So that's one thing. But then what happens if inflation turns from 3 to 12? Well, we'll come to that, but let's go back over here. So thinking about a group of policies, let's say 10 million. We are in Q2 18 here. Let's say in Q2 18 we sell $10 million of home premiums. Then what happens? So you sell, let's go, I'm going to go 1st of 7, that's July of 18. You sell a load of policies, right? And then let's say they are 1-year policies. Now on average, you would have losses come in a year into that policy, just by average, right? But in fact, many policies will come after that. So let's just say half of the claims that you get on those policies that you sold in Q2, probably a bit more than half, would come into this is 2019 here, the start of 2019. So quite a few of those would come into accident year 2019. When the claim happens, the year that the claim happens is accident year 19. And then from there, we have about, and we'll get to the math a bit later on, but we have about 18 months before we have something that we would call like 80% confidence in the loss history. So it would take quite a long time. Let's say this is about 2.5 years in total. So sell policies in 18 and you get the loss history come through to, let's say, mid to end of 2020, and that's fine, all good and well so far. And of course we, in that time period, up until the end of, or mid 2020, we'll be working with this 3% inflation rate. So if you're Lemonade or you're another insurance company and you want to price going forward, unless you were really smart, and some people were, including the company I worked for, but many people missed it. If you were really smart, you would see inflation coming and you would put prices up, but most people didn't, including Lemonade, as far as I know. And so you price based on 3%, but in fact what you don't know is the actual inflation rate that will apply over the course of the policies is 12%. So we'll come back to that thought. So let's talk about the loss triangle. I know I'm jumping around, but that's fine. This is a incurred loss development triangle for Lemonade. Now I got this from the SEC filings, the 10K, and the triangles that are listed have incurred plus incurred but not reported. So that's the term called IBNR, which is the let's say the reserves or the extra bit over and above the incurred. But this triangle I've kind of derived for home, and I'll explain how in another video, so it'll make this one too long. But just bear in mind this is incurred for LMND. So what can we do with this? Well, what this is we're saying for accident year 2020, i.e. claims that arise in the year 2020, after one development year, which would be the end, this is like the end of 2020 for this policy, that total amount of money is $21.5 million, right? And then staying with 2020 for a bit, after 2 development years, so now this would be the end of 21, this is now 29.8, and then after 3 years that would be the end of 2022, then it's 30.4, and then at the end of 2023 it's 31.3. So what we have, if you just ignore these three for a second, just think about 2020, what's happening. We start getting claims come in for the accident year 2020, and they start at 21.5 and then they go up to 29, 30, 31. We can use that as a history, right? So if you're pricing, you can use the history to think about what happened in the future. But something big happened, right? You can see these numbers start getting really much bigger over time. And one thing that's going on here is just that Lemonade is selling more policies, more home policies are being sold, and so you would expect the incurred numbers to go up. But actually also the frequency and more importantly severity are going up a lot. Now, if we kind of compare, let's say we could take all of these numbers, add them up, and then we take all of these numbers and add them up. Well, what could we do with that? What if we were to take that number and then take that number and we divide between the two? So we get what we call a link ratio. So what we want to do is say, on average, how much did these go up by? And I will quickly cut and then put the numbers in and come back to you. Okay, so as I'm filming this, I realised I'm just doing a terrible job of presenting, for which I apologise, and I'll put up some slides as part of this video so you can see the numbers more clearly. It is what it is. These are called link ratios. So basically what we're doing to get this 1.49, we're adding up all of these numbers, and you can do it yourself at home, and then we're adding up all of these numbers, dividing the two, and the ratio between this set added up and this set added up is 1.49. And then the same for if we did these pairs, add these two up, divide by these two added up, we get 1.06, and then the same, divide 31.3 by 30.4 and we get this 1.03. Then what we can do is we can get this, which is the percentage of ultimate. So I'll just quickly put this in. Let's just say, for the sake of argument right now, and this probably isn't accurate, but let's say that at time 4 this portfolio is fully developed. Let's just say that. So then if we work backwards, if we divide by the link ratios, we can get to the percentage of ultimate at each time. And working back, we can say at time 1 the percentage of ultimate developed is 59.2. So what that means, I really want to try and make it simple. It's not, well, it might be simple, but it's not for me. It means that for 2023, where we've got this 52.7 million of incurred loss, we're saying that this basic model says that this 52.7 million is at 59% of what it will ultimately be in the future. So if we could go out to, the end of time, we're going to say that 2023 is, let's do the math actually over here. So let's say the incurred is 52.7, and then the percentage of ultimate is 59.2. So let me draw you a quick picture. If I just put that pen down a second. So we're saying, let me just draw a generic loss development triangle. We're saying that this is time here, okay? So time is going there, and then we've got ultimate percentage, or percentage of ultimate, let's call that. So after time, let's call this time 12 months, and this time, let's say 24 months. If we come across, we're just saying that we're at 50, if I could spell that would help, 59% of ultimate. So all we're saying there is that if 2023 is at 59%, then let's divide by 59% to get to ultimate. So I forget what the math is, I think it's something like 86 million or something like that. If we divide 52.7 divided by 59.2% equals the ultimate. And this gives us a model to figure out what the ultimate loss will be. But notice something. It takes a long time to get to ultimate. It takes about 4 years in this example. Now bear in mind, this is the key message of this video. The key message is, we priced our 2018 Q2 data, our policies based on old data, right? So we had old data coming in from like 2014, 15, 16. That came into our pricing for 2018. Then we sold a load of policies, and then this happened. We get this kind of time lag where we sell a load of policies, and then over time some claims start coming through, and then we get like these claims coming through into the future, and then they hit accident year, whichever, let's say 19 or 20, whichever accident year it is, they hit that accident year here, right? At the start of the accident year, in Jan, you start getting losses coming through from those policies that you sold last year. And in February and March and April, and over time, those losses are coming in. But after 1 year, even though we've already waited quite a long time, we're saying after 1 year, we're only at like 60% of the ultimate loss amount. And so that's like already 3 years. And then after 2 years, we're at like, 88%. So now it's like 4 years. But what's happening all this time? Our price is staying the same. Well, no, this is the point. We had flat inflation. So all of this pricing, all of this reserving works fine if you have flat inflation. But if inflation rate changes, you have a big, big problem. So we say that, let's say there's a 4 year time from when you actually sold the policy, and that was based on even older data. There's a 4 year time delay from when you sold the policy to when you're at like 88% of ultimate. And then you have a view as to, hey, I have a problem, my losses are going through the roof. So what can you do about it? Well, not much, because all that time, from 2020 onwards, the inflation rate went through the roof. So if you think about 12% compound for 4 years is like, what, 50% or 60%? That is huge. Whereas 3% compounded for 4 years is like, I don't know, 15% or some small number, right? Now the problem Lemonade has is, number one, the guys just didn't have the experience that they should have had. Like, I used to work for Chubb, probably the biggest, best well-known insurance company in the world. Very, very well-run company. Now, I specifically remember in late 2020, or maybe mid-21, in that sort of region, Evan Greenberg, the chief executive, he was talking internally. It wasn't for information to leave the building because it was valuable IP. He was talking to the employees on the Global Employee Conference, saying like, home is going through the roof. I was also working on reserving home. I was saying it too. Like, it was there to see if you knew what to look for, but I think Lemonade missed it. That's fine. I've said before, they're tech entrepreneurs. They're not first and foremost insurance guys. They're tech guys. So there is that to bear in mind. Anyway, all that to say, if you have 4 years of 12% compound in your losses, and you thought you were going to have 3, that means that your losses are going to be way, way worse. So all the guys that are running around saying, oh, well, the AI doesn't work, the, Lemonade's model doesn't work, all of that, I think they're just missing the point that the compound inflation has had a huge impact. Now, coupled with that, Lemonade, along this journey, right, even if they knew what was happening, they would have been saying to regulators, like if they spotted along this journey that inflation was accelerating, they would have gone to regulators and said, like, we've got a problem with inflation, we think our home losses are going to go through the roof, we want to put rates up 30%. And they would have this big back and forth argument, and the regulators would be saying, well, you know what, mate, yeah, sure, you've got an insurance company to run, but I've got an election to run. I'm Gavin Newsom in California, and I really would like to get re-elected in 2021. And we know, actually, meet Kevin. He ran to be governor of California in 21, I think it was, up against Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom won. But this would have been one of the things that policyholders in California are saying to their elected officials, hey man, why can't I buy insurance? Tell these insurance companies to stop raising prices, it's not fair. And who does the politician listen to? Well, of course, the guy who votes for him, right? So there's this pushback. So what does Lemonade do? If you are in, let's say, mid-2022, and you are going to the regulator and saying, look, this is my model, my development curve is this, my losses are going up through the roof, I need some rate, I need to save my book. And the regulator says, sorry mate, but no, you can't do that. Yes, you want 40% rate increase, you can have 15. What do? So if you're Lemonade and you have heavily invested to acquire those customers in 2020, early 2021, you've got a tough choice. You can say, hey, 15% doesn't work, it's not high enough. Or you can swallow it and say, let me just take that 15%, renew the policy, and hope that I can make up in future, because I don't want to lose that customer. Remember, if I just change pens for a second, we are working with industry acquisition costs of $900. So if you're Lemonade and you're like, well, I could not renew this policy, but that will cost me implicitly $900 of lost customer acquisition cost. Or I could renew that policy even though I kind of feel like I'll lose money on it, and I'll hope I can make it up in future. I think that's what's been going on for the last probably 2 or 3 years, is Lemonade has been trying to renew, trying to get those rate increases through. Regulators have been saying, sorry, you can't have 40%, you can have 15, you can have 20, and their hands are tied. So then there's this choice of, do I let go of my customer that cost me implicitly $900, or do I renew? So that's where I think things are. The really good news about Q4 and why I think it was, it's just something that I think, it's my personal view, Lemonade being willing to just say, hey, you know what, enough is enough. My rates haven't gone through. I am willing to just let that customer go. We know from the earnings deck that they're not trying to acquire any new customers at all in California. My own personal view is that they will also be not renewing. I think they've probably had 15 or like small rate increases. Don't quote me, I'm just making this up. But I think they'll have had small rate increases coming through, not enough to support the portfolio, and they're just saying, you know what, enough is enough. And we know Chubb has done this, State Farm, a lot of the big insurers have just said, hey, you know what, California, like, you're just not in the real world. This is how much insurance costs, and you're not allowing us to charge the correct price to customers. So you know what, sorry, but we're just not going to sell policies. And I think that is what we'll see in 2024, is when we get to the end of the year, I think we'll have an update from the team and they'll say, look, we just didn't renew a lot of those policies for home and motor in California. So what does that do for enforced premium? Well, of course, it goes down for home. I've seen a lot of, debate and kind of unhappiness in the investor community about, the guide was too low. I think those guys are just missing the big picture. I think the big picture is rate is way too low. The team are not able to get those rates across the line in many places, and so they will just rip up the home books and start again, and they will move into home and renters in the US. And I think in 2024 we will see a big push into the UK. I think you can see that in the earnings letter. So I'm really bullish. I've been keeping an eye on this kind of dynamic for the last year, let's say, not explicitly stating it, but it's been in the back of my mind. And the Q4 earnings report just made it pretty clear that this is where things are with home. But think about the positives. Even think about how unusual this is. Like, for you guys who are economists, how unusual is it to have 3% inflation for, let's say, 20 years? Like, a long time. It was a long time with 3%, pretty stable inflation, then suddenly we get 12%. That is a very unusual event, and yet Lemonade still posted a Q4 loss ratio of 77%. Like, that's pretty good. So I was so encouraged when I saw that loss ratio come through. I mean, I was just over the moon. I was worried that we would go back to the 90s. So anything in the 70s is really, really good. What else can I say? I think the cash position, the cash burn, is really good. Oh, I've totally forgotten. There's so much more stuff I'm supposed to say. And again, sorry if this video is really long and rambly. I did warn you guys it would be unscripted and a bit all over the place, but there's something else we really have to cover. So, very excitingly, in the Q4 letter, the team talked about this concept of selling policies on third-party paper. let's talk about what that means. Right, so some of you guys who have been following me for a while will have noticed a massive rambling, pretty pointless discussion I had with Neil, and it was all about he had some comment with Daniel to say there's only a 1 in 1,000 chance Lemonade goes under, and I disagreed. I thought it was higher, and so we had this big argument. Anyway, the reason behind that was I was worried about home. In my head, I thought home is really not a good place to be. Losses are going through the roof, rate isn't there, inflation is going crazy, and you've got this underlying volatility risk and cap risk. So I was really worried about home. To have home come down now as a percentage of the portfolio, and the guys really taking their foot off the gas, is really, really good news, and I'll tell you why. So I just want to draw a bell curve because I like bell curves. Let's say this is pet, and let's say this is a 50, or let's call it a 60% loss ratio, and then you've got a normal distribution, and then over here you've got, let's say, an 80% loss ratio. So it's like, well, it's pretty hard to lose money in pet. If that is my distribution of outcomes, so low side is 40, high side is 80, pretty hard to lose money. But then let's draw one for home. Home looks a little different. So home will kind of come up like this, and then it will drop off. But it's got what we call, this is a term, it's called a fat tail. So this part here is the tail. So as I bring this down, it comes, well actually I need to come a bit higher. It comes all the way down here like this. And let's say this is, let's say we sold our 10 million. No, let's go with loss ratios. Let's say on average, our loss ratio is going to be, let's say, 75%. But over here, you have got a different colour, you've got 150%. And then over here, you've got, let's say, 300%. And then all the way over here, you've even got some numbers that are like 500%. And that is because home is, and I won't explain it in detail, but it's just a much, much riskier business. Statistically, it just is. Just please take my word for it. If you want to look into the underlying models, this would be modelled with a kind of a Gaussian distribution, and this would be like more like a normal distribution for pet. Much different, and the mathematics is available. I won't go into it here. So what happens then if you are Lemonade and you're selling this business where you hope in a good time you'll make 75 or 60, or on a really good day down here somewhere you might make 60, but you're likely to make around 75, but there's a pretty strong chance you make 150% loss ratio, which is bad. That's not a good thing at all. What do? Well, you find somebody with some capital, because there are people who are fine to take this risk. Like, if you think about, if you wrote $1 million worth of this business, even if you hit that relatively unlikely 150 million, how much you can, 150%, sorry, you're going to lose 500k. So, I mean, no big deal. Nobody wants to lose $500,000, but it's not the end of the world. But if you go in like really strong and you sell 300 million of that premium, you might lose, in that bad scenario, 450. You might lose 150 million, right? So that's not good. Lemonade does not have the balance sheet or the risk appetite to write loads of home business. They just don't. Trust me, I can show it in a model elsewhere, and I will probably, but they just don't have the capital and the balance sheet. And this was my, let's call it my beef with Neil, and with Daniel saying the 1 in 1,000, is I'm like, well, if 30% of the portfolio is in home, there's no way the balance sheet can support that risk. And I'm really encouraged, personally, I'm really encouraged to see the team just saying, hey, you know what? I don't like home right now. Home just feels risky to me right now. So that's really, really good. So what do? If you're Lemonade and you're in California and you've got a policy holder that's paying you, let's say they're paying you $2,000 for a home policy. And let's just say you get your rate approved and you say, right, in next year, you're going to be paying us 20% more. So let's say now it's 2,400. But there's a problem. And the problem is Lemonade already has a lot of policies. Let's say, I don't know this number, but let's say it's $100 million worth of home premium. And they say, you know what? If I add this policy and another policy and another policy, at some point I've just got an overweight book, overweighting to home. And that's not good for business, because if this scenario happens, if we end up over here at the 150s, I could be out of business. So what do? So there's an actual term for this, and this is actually a very, very common thing. It's called a surplus line. So a surplus line is where you say, I've got my risk appetite. I only want to sell, let's say, 100 policies in this little bit of California, but let's say 50 more people come and they want to buy that same policy. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send this off to my buddy in, let's say, Munich Re. Munich Re doesn't have much business here in California. They would love to have that premium. They could take that bit of risk. They're fine with that. So they will take it. It's not on the Lemonade books. And then in return, Munich Re will pay Lemonade a commission. So it's pretty good for everybody. Munich Re gets a piece of business that they didn't have before, that they wouldn't have accessed before. Lemonade passes on business that they just didn't want to keep, and they get a ceding commission. How does it work from a business perspective for us Lemonade guys? So Lemonade will not, I repeat, they will not be dealing with the legacy insurer systems or anything like that. They will be selling the policy through their current bots, through their current infrastructure, and collecting that premium, managing claims, sorting everything out. The customer will never know that it's a Munich Re policy or whoever. And then what happens every month, Lemonade will tell Munich Re, I've sold this many policies, this is how much the premiums were, there's your money. And then at the end of each month as well, they'll say, this is how many claims we've had, can we have some money back? And so you just get these dollars going to and from the two companies. There's no actual impact to the Lemonade story at all. It's just, I send you premium, I get claims. So I hope that makes sense. Worth saying as well, I think that will be the way that things go in the UK. I have got a strong feeling that Aviva will be the carrier, and again, it'll be the same thing. It'll be the Lemonade experience, Lemonade distribution, claims, etc. But it will be an underlying capital provider issuing that paper. So I hope that makes sense, and let me know if you have comments and questions on that, and I'm happy to go into that a bit further. So I'll wrap things up on this video. I am very, very bullish on Lemonade. Way, way more bullish than I was before this earnings report. Everything I wanted to see, well, not everything, but a lot of things I wanted to see I got. I got the cash flow. That is my probably number one thing that I'm looking for in Lemonade. I'm not looking for a 10x in the stock right now. I'm just looking to not lose my capital. As long as Lemonade doesn't go out of business, I'm really happy. And I think the Q4 earnings report really demonstrated that the guys have an eye on risk, they have an eye on continuity and steering the ship through this kind of perilous waters that we're in right now. Someday inflation will calm down, things will go back to a normal economic outlook, and they'll be back to selling a bit more home and building things out. Right now isn't that time that you want them to do that. Right now is a time to kind of bring the ship in a little bit, sail in those kind of calmer waters of pets and renters, and get that cash flow picking up. Just quickly, remember the development curves we talked about earlier. So we're saying this is time and this is percentage of ultimate. Now I want to draw two graphs here. So we said home kind of looks something like this. Takes a while, takes quite a long time for those claims to come through and us to get to ultimate. But pet is something like this. Pet is like up here. And you know why? Because what happens when you make a pet claim? You go to the vet, you pay for your pet to get sorted out, and you go on the app and you tell Lemonade, this is how much it was, give me some money. And they send you the money that day. So there is really no delay. My voice is going. I'm going to leave you guys there. Hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry it was just a mess of rambling. Let me know what I can make clearer in the future, and we'll catch up soon. See you later.